Hey, if you're watching this, you're interested on how to achieve trunk-based workflow development using GitHub Actions, right? So I've got a very basic Node project setup. We're going to use that to essentially have two pages, a home page and about page, and we're going to deploy that to Vercel. We're going to have a couple of environments. We're going to have production staging. And the goal is for us to test every change that we want to reintegrate into the main branch and only accept that change if the tests pass. For testing, we're going to be using Playwright, and the test is going to be pretty simple. And we're going to demonstrate how you can do trunk-based development using this approach with GitHub Actions. So I have a little repo. We're going to be building it together. The project is pretty simple. You have an about page, you have a home page, static files. I'm not even running anything locally. Pretty simple project, pretty dumb. It's a proof of concept. And right now what we're going to be doing is to just deploy it on Vercel. I'm going to do it the really simple way. We're not building anything. It's a static URL, right? Which doesn't work. The root directory might need to be source, not the directory. The directory, let's say source, save. Let's create a deployment. Let's go. So we have Vercel hosting our static websites. Let me just quickly deploy the changes that I did, and then we're going to start working on the workflows. Right, so we have our homepage. We can go to about and we can go back. Let's actually create the folder that GitHub needs in order to detect that you have workflows and then run them according to the rules that we'll create. So let me first check out into... All right, so now that we have it, I'm going to create a new folder, which is .github. Within this one, we will create another one called workflows. And now we can create the first YAML file that is going to be our actual action. Within the folder, I'm going to create a new file called output codes. I like to be descriptive, like the file name tells you that this is triggered when we will be pushing codes. We're going to be giving it a name and then the actual run, which is what we're going to be doing on this step. And for now, let's just echo, I will put your code. Let's put, and I should have a pull request showing up. All right, there it goes. As you can see, the action is already here. This is the name of the file, and this is the name of the job called link code. And if we click on it, you can actually, what GitHub is doing, and in this case, we have this thing that is just echoing our linker codes. Now, this is just to show you that setting up a Git workflow action /jobs is just as simple as adding YAML files and telling them when to run. If you've used GitLab, it's pretty similar in that sense. So as you can see, when we open a pull request, because we have the vanilla Vercel setup, it is going to always be listening to changes. And actually, we don't want to do that. So let's right now get into the project, go to your project settings under Git and disconnect it. Now, every time you do something, the changes won't show up automatically. Vercel won't do anything. We are going to set up all of that. Now we have our very basic vanilla GitHub workflow. What we want to do is set up the other ones. Add a new file called on openpr.yaml. What we want when we open a PR is to run tests. That's what we'll be setting up Playwright with. So now we have a workflow that is going to run every time a pull request is opened, targeting the main branch. And let's see if GitHub actually picks that up. All right, so as you can see, here it is being ran. Now when we open a PR and when we push codes, we can trigger workflows. Let's add the merging, the PR, and the tag creation workflows. So what we're doing here is to deploy to staging. We'll be doing that later. If the pull request being closed is targeting the main branch, and if the type of close is merge, because you could close it manually, and in that case, you don't care. You actually want them to be merged, and that's when we'll be pushing those to staging. Finally, the scaffolding that we're doing here is for creating tags. So this workflow essentially gets triggered whenever there is a tag that, in this case, matches the December format. And we are just going to do a little confirmation that the tag is actually being created from the main branch and not from this other random branch. Let's merge and see what happens. And let's look at the actions. So now we have actually deploying to staging and not deploy to preview, because we just merged into main. Now we only need to check that creating tags also triggers the right workflow, and we're good to continue with the scaffolding of the trunk-based workflow. So let's create a release. And we should have an action called, a workflow that is deploying to production, because we actually created a tag. This shows that the 4 basic workflows to perform trunk-based development are set up now. All right, now we're ready to do our first deployment to Vercel using Vercel CLI. And I'm going to show you how that is done by using the push codes. So essentially, we will want to always deploy to the Vercel preview environment preview link every time we push code except for main. First of all, we will need to set up Vercel organization ID and Vercel project ID environment variables so that the CLI can pick those up and then do everything as we want it. Then we will create a new job called deploy preview, which I'm going to copy and paste here and run through each of the steps. Deploy preview is the job that will actually build the app and deploy it to Vercel. And what is happening here is that we're going to be running that on the development environment. We're going to tell this job that it requires the link code to be finished, because you can have them running in parallel. But in this case, we just want to first lint and then actually deploy. The steps are going to be, as usual, checking out the code to its latest stage, installing the CLI. Then we need to pull Vercel's environment information. Then we're going to build the project artifacts. Finally, we're going to deploy it. And we use the parameter pre-build so that we tell Vercel, hey, just deploy this to a random pre-build URL, right? And now we need to set up the Git Actions environment variables to be picked up, or secrets in this case. So the way that you do that is you go into your settings, into your project settings, underneath secrets and variables and actions. Now I already have mine set up. I'm going to show you where you can fetch those in Vercel. First of all, you're going to go underneath settings. And in general, you have your team ID. That's the organization ID that I mentioned. Copy that and paste it as your org ID value. That's for the org ID. Then you're going to go to your account and you're going to create a token called Vercel token, define the scope for yourself and set an expiration date. And again, put it here. Then finally, you also need your project ID, which is enter your project, go to settings and scroll down. You should see something called project ID, copy that and paste it as your Vercel project ID secrets. Now that those things are set up, this workflow should run, and let's actually push it and see what happens. All right, so now we do have our 2 jobs. Deploy preview is running. We can click on it and see every step along the way. Again, there's no change. So, the homepage is looking the same, but actually let's change it and see that in action. So I'm going to go to the homepage now, and I'm going to say homepage v2. Deploy is running. As you can see, it's pretty quick. And now if I look at my staging environment, I see, or not staging, but pre-prod preview sort of environment, I have the v2 here. And if I look at the, I believe, production, there's no change, right? Demonstrating that by pushing code, I can have it in pre-prod. So now we're going to introduce testing when opening a pull request, and if the test fails, we will prevent merging, will not allow the merge into a production branch. And for that, we're going to be using Playwright. So if you don't know, Playwright is essentially a tool that allows you to perform end-to-end tests on a web app on different browsers. And it's a pretty seamless tool. You're going to check it out now and recreate a couple of simple examples. So now let's set it up and let's try it locally first before setting up the workflow to use it. So if you just go to the docs, it should be pretty seamless to do. Let's install it as a dependency. Quickly showing you, as you can see here, we can actually run just the tests that are within the tests folder. So if I npx playwright tests, we'll run them and actually generate the results here and a report. And as we can see, both have passed. So what's the test? It's actually going to the Playwright page and checking that there's a title or whatever, like the expected title to contain substring, get started link, something like that, right? So pretty seamless. We're going to be doing something similar for our project. What I'm going to show you though is that you can also pass the argument UI, and it will spin a UI interface that you can use to check actually what is happening while you run the test. So that's useful for yourself. Let's run it. It's too quick for us, right? But essentially here it is. We go to the page, Playwright dev, and we expect the title to have something, and after that, whatever, a get started page, and you can actually see here the get started button sort of like getting clicked by the Playwright's automation. Right, so our basic test for the homepage is to look for the text hello world, is to have a navigation link, click on that link, which will take us to the about page, and we'll assert that that the URL has that string. Now you'll notice that we have the start page localhost URL. And the reason that we'll be using this is because Playwright needs to load the app from somewhere, right? In essence, you need to be running it in order to then open it like we saw previously. And that's why we will need to have it running somewhere. In order to do that, we're going to be using something called PM2. PM2 is nothing but a process manager for your Node.js app, meaning that it's going to be running it in the background. So just go ahead and run npm install PM2. I already have it, so in essence, within your folder, you're going to be doing PM2 serve, the place where your static assets are, src, and we're going to give it a name of server for convenience. As you can see, it's running now. And if I go to localhost 8080, I do see my index page now, and I have my about page as well. And it's being served, I can navigate, and that's what we want in order to run our tests. So let's look at that now. So again, we are going to do npx playwright test UI, so we can look at it running. Hopefully it will work. And as you can see, it did navigate to the about page. It did find the link, it navigated to the about page, but we haven't yet added the hello world string that it's expecting. So let's just fix that quite quickly. And so it should display hello world somewhere. Let's go here and say hello. Let's run. Everything passed. Pretty cool. Now GitHub needs to know how to run this. All right, now we're gonna basically change our OpenPR workflow so that every time it's triggered, we're going to run Playwright and we're going to run the tests in the GitHub workflow. All right, so what do we have here? Essentially, we're going to be running a job called end-to-end tests. As I explained previously, we need PM2 to run our server to serve the static assets so that Playwright can actually use the localhost URL. We're going to trigger it as we did previously. We're going to serve it. Then we're going to get the Playwright version that we have installed, and we need to install it in the context of the job to be run. So there's some caching strategy here, and this is the important part, which is essentially running the tests and basically doing what we just saw previously. Now we only need to add this. Now that we pushed it, we can create a branch, create the pull requests, and let's see what happens. Let's open the Actions tab, and the perform test is what we're looking for. We just pushed add Playwright job. That's our commit. Let's see what is happening. Installing PM. And now it's going to run Playwright. And this is what we want to see. The 3 tests have all passed. Now that we have the tests running in the CI, every time we open a pull request, let's see what happens if the test fails. So for that, I'm going to modify the homepage, which expects to read hello world. So I am going to modify it by writing hello universe. All right, job is running. So as we can see, the hello world was expected to be visible, and it wasn't. So it failed as expected. Now, if we look at our current open pull requests, we can see that we can still merge it even though the tests failed. And the reason that you can do this is because the rules for this branch haven't yet been set up to prevent merging when there's failures in the actions jobs. So let's set that up right now. When you're in your project settings, look for the rules entry on the side nav rule sets. I already have one, and we're gonna add require status checks to pass. Now you need to add a check for that. And basically the check is, as a shorthand, it's basically the job that we have. In this case, the end-to-end tests from our actions. Now that it's here, I save the changes. And if I go back to my current pull requests, it no longer allows me to merge it, even though I could do it, right? And it's telling me that all the statuses must pass before merging. So let's fix the test quite quickly. I'm going to revert the change. I'm going to git add and commit fixes wrong string. Push it. It will run again as soon as it picks up. Still running. And all right. So as we can see, they all passed, and now we can merge safely into our stable production branch. It is time to deploy to staging once the pull request is merged. We're going to be doing that on the YAML file on PR merge. The job itself is pretty similar to the deploy preview job that we created every time you push codes. So let's just copy that. Now that we are deploying to Vercel every time we merge a pull request, what we want is a sort of stable URL that we can use for anything that we want every time a pull request is merged. Instead of using Vercel deploy and just forgetting about that, we're actually running it and keeping the results, which is the URL where your build has just been deployed and is being hosted into deployment URL. Then we're gonna say, hey, take that URL and point it to trunk dev staging. Trunk dev staging is gonna be our stable branch our stable URL. Now that we have this, I'm actually going to change something here on the homepage. I'm going to put here v2 just for having a change that we should only see in the staging environment and of course in the pre-prod environment that we have. So I'm going to add it. All right, so the preview is already available. And if I open it, I do see v2 showing up here. Pretty cool. And if I go back to our actions, I'm running the tests. So I need that to finish in order to merge my pull request. All right, it took a bit longer than usual. There's something with the post cleanup jobs that is hanging and taking a couple of minutes, but now we can merge it. So once we merge, we should have our deploy to staging job triggered. Here we go. And as you can see now, the alias is saying successfully pointing trunk dev staging to the build that we've just done, right? So if I open that, I do see my Hello World v2 version here, while my production obviously hasn't been changed. All right, we're pretty close to completion. Now the only thing that we need is to deploy to our production URL every time we create a new tag. As you might guess, it is pretty much similar to what we already have in the other environments. So this job here is called deploy to prod, requires the previous job, which is called confirm branch. The only difference is that we have the argument prod, which means that we're telling Vercel, hey, deploy this to production, please. So let's save that. And let's also revert the little v2 version that I had here. And let's push that. Now that all checks have passed, we can merge as previously. And if the job is done, we refresh, there's no longer the v2 string there. Now let's actually deploy to production by creating a new tag. But again, nothing should change on the production URL because we didn't do anything there. Well, we just want to see this running and we want to see that Vercel is picking that up. And I think it's already done because it's already displaying that the latest version was deployed like just now on production. Now that we basically have configured everything, let's go through the whole workflow and see how that goes. Let's create a quick issue because I want to improve the README, make it a little nicer. All right, so the README has been updated with a useful diagram that demonstrates the whole workflow. And if we navigate to our vanity URLs, you'll see that we have trunk dev saying hello world, and we have staging, which has the updated version that we want to put into production. So let's quickly create a tag for that. And I'm going to do a final issue just to demonstrate that we'll have a staging environment with a different look than the production one. And we're going to just merge so that our staging environment is different than our production environment. So now our production should tell us that we are in production, and our staging should tell us that we're looking at staging, and it sends us back to production. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while actually, because I did a similar proof of concept on how to do trunk-based development on GitHub for my previous team before implementing, so that folks could understand how it worked and how their workflow had to change. And now I decided to put it out there so that it can help other developers to do that for their own projects, or at least to have something more tangible when discussing it with their teams.